All right, let's get right into it. We are about to pull back the curtain on a 4,000-year-old mystery, a secret hidden inside one of the ancient world's most popular and, as it turns out, most misunderstood board games. This is the incredible story of 58 Holes.
So picture this. You're a merchant, maybe 4,000 years ago. You've traveled for weeks, and you meet another trader from a land you've never even heard of. You don't speak a word of the same language. How on earth do you build enough trust to actually trade with each other? Well, the answer might just be hiding in a simple game.
But before we can figure out what this game did, we have to figure out what to even call it. And that's where the story gets tricky, because as we're about to see, this ancient game had a major identity crisis.
So on one side, you've got this pioneering archaeologist, Flinders Petrie. Back in 1890, he gave it a very logical, if kind of boring name, the Game of 58 Holes. But then 20 years later, Howard Carter, yep, the same guy who'd go on to find King Tut's tomb, unearths this absolutely gorgeous version with these cool animal-headed pins. He calls it Hounds and Jackals, and that name was so much more exciting, it's pretty much stuck ever since.
But wait, it doesn't stop there. Some people called it the Shen game after this cool hieroglyph for eternity that you see on some of the boards. Others called it the palm tree game because, well, it often had a palm tree design right in the middle. And to make it even more confusing, historians are still arguing over whether it's a game called ISP or maybe Patiabzu that they've read about in ancient texts. So, what was this thing really?
And this part is just wild. It shows you just how lost its original meaning was. When this hippo-shaped board got to the Louvre way back in 1827, the curators had absolutely no clue what they were looking at. They figured the little holes were for holding ink, so they cataloged it as a frog-shaped writing case. A writing case! It took them decades to figure out it was actually a game board.
For a long, long time, the main theory was that this game was all about Egypt. Not just a game for fun, but something deeply spiritual, a core part of their beliefs about life and death.
See, for the ancient Egyptians, getting to the afterlife wasn't a sure thing. It was this dangerous journey you had to take, filled with all these trials. And this game? It was seen as a kind of map or a guide for that journey. Winning the game was like successfully making it to the paradise of the afterlife.
But this is where that purely spiritual theory starts to get a little shaky. Of course, we find these stunning, pristine boards made of ebony and ivory buried in tombs, obviously meant for the next life. But we also find boards like the one on the right. It's smaller, it's made of simple wood, and you can see it's been used a lot. It's got wear and tear, it's even been repaired. This wasn't just some sacred object saved for a tomb. People were actually playing this game over and over during their lives.
And the way you played the game totally reinforces this spiritual connection. Some of the holes on the board were marked with the hieroglyph Nefer, which means good or beautiful. Landing on one of those was a good thing, like finding a safe spot on your treacherous journey, both across the board and, through the underworld.
Honestly, the easiest way to imagine the gameplay is like an ancient version of Chutes and Ladders. You can see these lines connecting some of the holes. Land on the right one, and you could take a shortcut, jumping way ahead. But land on the wrong one, and boom, you're sent backwards, a huge setback. It was a really intense race to that final hole.
This also means it wasn't just a game of pure luck. They didn't use dice like we do. They used these things called throwing sticks, which made the odds all wonky. Just look at this chart. Rolling a 2 was by far the most likely thing to happen. So smart players had to manage risk. If you knew there was a trap 2 spaces away, you knew you were in a really dangerous spot. It was all about probability and strategy.
So, okay, a really deep, symbolic Egyptian game. Pretty cool. Case closed, right? Not even close. Because this supposedly Egyptian game started popping up everywhere. And this is where the story takes a really interesting turn.
This game wasn't just in Egypt. I mean, not by a long shot. Archaeologists have found boards all over the ancient world. In the huge cities of Mesopotamia like Ur and Babylon, in modern-day Turkey and Iran, and even all the way up in the Caucasus region. This game basically went viral 4,000 years ago. But why? What was so special about this game that it could cross all those borders and cultures?
And here's maybe the biggest clue that the whole "it's an Egyptian thing" story wasn't quite right. The game pretty much vanishes from Egypt after about 1650 BCE, just disappears. But everywhere else, people kept playing it for another 1,000 years. If this game was so fundamental to Egyptian religion, why would they be the first to stop playing it while the rest of the world kept on going?
This question leads us to a pretty recent discovery, thousands of miles from the pyramids, in a place called Azerbaijan. and this find would completely flip the entire origin story on its head.
So, check out this timeline. For about a century, we thought the oldest boards were Egyptian, from around 2000 BCE. But then, archaeologists found versions of the game carved right into the rock in shelters in Azerbaijan. And get this, they date to the exact same time period. And they might even be older. All of a sudden, Egypt isn't the guaranteed starting point anymore. The whole story might actually begin somewhere else entirely.
This discovery forced a complete rethink, a whole new theory that finally explains the game's incredible spread and what its true purpose might have been for all those different people.
The new thinking is this: maybe the game's real magic wasn't its connection to the afterlife. Maybe it was its power to connect the living. It wasn't just a game. It was a piece of social technology, and an absolutely essential one for a world that was becoming connected by long-distance trade.
As researchers Walter Christ and Rahman Abdullayev call it, these games were social lubricants. Now, think about what that really means. You're that merchant again, facing a stranger. To play this game, you have to agree on the rules, probably using just hand gestures. You have to demonstrate that you can take turns and be patient. You have to play fair, showing you're trustworthy. It's a low-stakes way to build rapport and a shared understanding, which is exactly what you need before you can start doing some high-stakes business.
So the story of 58 Holes is so much more than just a dusty artifact. It's the story of a 4,000-year-old tool for human connection. And it kind of leaves us with a big question for our own time, doesn't it? In a world that can feel just as divided, what are our social lubricants? What universal games are we all playing to bring each other just a little bit closer?